start talking about the cheesy horror B-movie Dracula in a women's prison. This was a 2017 movie directed by Jeff Leroy and stars Victoria Del Mar, Robert Rhine and Rachel Riley. Actually a series of movies. There is a werewolf version and a Frankenstein version as well. And I've got to be honest, when I first watched this movie, I actually thought it was going to be one of these porn movies that have been kind of recut just to be a, you know, a more mainstream movie. But alas, it is actually a legitimate kind of movie, albeit one with lots of TNA we'll discuss. So what is the story here? A very, very, very loose take on the Dracula mythos. Of course, in this version, Dracula, in fact, is the head warden of a prison complex, and he rules over this with all the kind of the vampires as his guards and whatnot, and you know, he's kidnapping girls in the kind of the local area, and you know, finding reasons for them to come in prison where they of course feast on them. And this focuses on the movie focuses on this woman who is in search of her lost sister, who was a journalist who has kind of gone missing whilst investigating this prison, and of course she, you know, comes in contact with a variety of vampires. Everyone here has got a spin on the kind of the vampire names. Van Helsing, the Harkers, for example, they all have kind of that kind of, you know, similar sort of style names, but their characters are obviously only very loosely based on those ones from the original Bram Stoker novel. So, what do we think about this movie, Dracula in a women's prison? So, do you know what? I was kind of dreading watching this one because sometimes these films can be a little tiresome, I won't lie. But I kind of wanted to watch it, but I was surprised at some of the kind of, the amount of gore in this movie. And now it's very cheap gore and it's kind of play for laughs, but this movie does actually have a fair amount of, albeit low budget, gore effects here, and some quite fun effects. There's also some fairly kind of funny jokes scattered around. I mean, not all of them hit, in fact probably most of them don't, but there's actually one or two jokes here that I actually did find quite funny, not all to do with kind of vampire stuff. There was a neat joke about someone's kind of liberal point of view politically and all that sort of thing. I thought was quite funny. A few kind of jokes in regards to kind of pop culture, things like that. But yeah, a couple of kind of funny jokes here and there landed for me. And of course, this movie has practically a pair of boobs in every other scene. And yeah, many different shapes, sizes, everything you can ever want if you are a boob person. There are some kind of quite, you know, cheesy kind of hammy lines, but this movie definitely is kind of its tongue way in cheek. Clearly don't be expecting this to be any type of sort of serious movie. This is pure B-movie schlock, and as such, it is kind of cheesy fun to a certain degree, and obviously all the cast here are absolutely having an absolute riot making this movie, and it obviously is kind of has some quite OTT scenes here that I think are, you know, are quite fun. But there's a lot of TNA in here, so obviously depending on how you feel about that, obviously if you're a fan of it, you are not going to be disappointed. There's a bevy of beauties here, all of whom pretty much get topless at one point and have a variety of sex scenes. Dracula himself, I've got to say, has I quite like the voice acting that he done. It's kind of quite neat, but the guy who plays Dracula, I would have maybe had someone who was a little bit more menacing, perhaps. But there you go. So I've got to be honest. Let's talk about some negatives now. Yeah, okay. This is a very, very low budget film, and it's clearly made for a certain audience. This is a pure B movie, first and foremost. So if you're wanting any type of serious kind of take on a vampire movie, this is not going to be for you. But if you like your schlocky women in prison movies, to be honest with you, this very much looks like a porn film and actually does have a couple of kind of porn actresses in here, then you know what to expect. But let's talk about any critiques that you can really realistically levy at this film. The big one for me is this movie is too long, quite frankly. I mean, it's not a hugely long film, but I feel for the story that it wants to be and the time of film that it wants to be, it's about 20 minutes too long. There are certain scenes here that are unnecessary or ones that just go on simply for too long. And to be honest with you, because this is just a schlocky B movie rather than one that you're actually invested in the story, you kind of feel like the time is dragging a little bit. This needed to be about 80 minutes, I would have said, but it's probably more like along the lines of, you know, an hour and 35 minutes, something along the lines of that. So yeah, to me it's kind of a little bit too long. Obviously the acting here is super hokey. Obviously there's kind of like, there's no sort of sense of realism. Like I said, the vampires themselves are a little bit disappointing. So you literally see some of the fangs kind of like come out of place and stuff, and the camera work is awful. There's quite a lot of times where you actually see the camera being like knocked as it kind of hits an actor and stuff like that, and you'll sort of see the camera kind of like move out the way. So it kind of looks like they've pretty much just done one take and kind of like move on. It's a low budget movie, very, very schlocky. It simply doesn't care. Yeah, it's going for a particular kind of an audience, and it's not really caring too much about the technical side of stuff. But I do feel that they could have done a little bit of care and preparation with the sort of camera movements, things like this. Sometimes it's a little bit underlit in certain sequences. And yeah, the acting's kind of super hammy and everything like that. But the main issue for me, I think, it's too long, and there are some technical stuff here that I feel was a little bit on the poorer side. I mean, the subject matter and the kind of the tone of the movie, I can't really put it as a kind of a critique, because that's what it's trying to do. You know, it's trying to be this particular movie. So you either like that or you don't. But based on the actual film that it's trying to be, that are my critiques. But should you watch this movie? Well, for a genuine audience, I'd probably have to say no, because this obviously is very aimed at the B-movie crowd, as simple as that, or people who watch kind of like, you know, a lot of kind of scream queens. There's many kind of like scream queens here, that kind of like, you know, a couple of porn actresses as well. It is kind of fun. There are some kind of goofy effects, but it's one of these movies that you can kind of put on and you just don't need to pay too much attention to ultimately. You can be doing other things. I'll give this one a 4 out of 10. Obviously, it clearly isn't a good film, but I think it is watchable for a certain audience. But it really could have done with it having like 20 minutes shaved off it to make it actually more of a punchy film. So 4 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.